Have you ever stopped to think about how we know the history of life on Earth? I mean, really know it. It's kind of like being a detective on the ultimate cold case, where the clues are millions of years old. Today, we're going to crack open the toolkit and see exactly how scientists solve these incredible puzzles. And we're starting with a real head-scratcher.
Yeah, you heard that right. A whale and a hippo. It sounds completely nuts, doesn't it? One lives its entire life in the ocean, the other hangs out in African rivers. They couldn't look more different. But this is exactly the kind of mystery that science can solve. It's a detective story, and we're about to follow the trail of evidence. So how do they do it? Well, scientists can't just hop in a time machine. Instead, they act like investigators, gathering all sorts of different clues and piecing them together to see the big picture. They're building a family tree for all of life, and our investigation starts with the most obvious evidence there is, the bodies themselves. All right, so first stop on our investigation, anatomy. By looking at the physical structures of different animals, scientists can find these amazing telltale signs of a shared history. And a lot of the time, these clues are hiding in plain sight. The first tool in our detective kit is something called comparative anatomy. It's really just the science of looking very, very closely at how different animals are built, searching for patterns and connections that you might not notice at first glance. And here's the really cool part. Sometimes you find animals that have body parts built from the exact same fundamental blueprint, even if they use them for totally different things. Think about it. Your arm is for grabbing stuff, a bat's wing is for flying, a dolphin's flipper is for swimming. But if you look at the bones inside, the structure is remarkably similar. And why is that? It's because they all inherited that basic design from a common ancestor, way back when. But, detectives have to be careful not to get fooled by false leads. Take a look at the other side of the slide. You've got a bird's wing and a bee's wing. They both do the same job, flight, but on the inside, they are built completely differently. Those are called analogous structures. The real clues, the ones that point to family, are the homologous ones, like your arm and that dolphin's flipper. Those are the true family heirlooms. Okay, now this leads us to one of the most fascinating types of clues out there, vestigial structures. These are like evolutionary leftovers. They're body parts that an organism's ancestors definitely used, but now they just don't serve that original purpose anymore. You can think of them as ghosts of an organism's past, still hanging around. And boom! Here's the smoking gun for our whale mystery. Whales obviously don't have back legs. They don't walk. So why on earth would they have these tiny, useless hip bones floating deep inside their bodies? Well, it's because their ancestors were land animals that walked on four legs. Those little bones are a direct physical link connecting whales back to mammals that lived on land. Case closed. All right, so checking out adult bodies gives us a ton of clues. But the evidence doesn't stop there. Our next set of clues comes from way, way earlier, from the very beginning of an animal's life. This brings us to a field called embryology, which is just the study of how animals develop before they're born. And what scientists discovered here is just mind-blowing. It turns out, organisms that look totally different as adults can look almost identical as tiny, developing embryos. I mean, get this. For a brief period during our development, human embryos have structures that look like gill slits, just like fish embryos. We even have tails for a little while. Now, of course, those things disappear as we continue to grow, but the fact that they show up at all is another huge clue, pointing to the deep, shared ancestry we have with all other vertebrates. Okay, so we've got clues from adult anatomy, we've got clues from embryos. What's next? Well, a good detective doesn't just stare at a pile of evidence, right? You have to organize it, you have to map it out to see how it all connects, and scientists have a perfect tool for that. And this is that map. It's called a cladogram, or a phylogenetic tree. It's basically a visual way to chart out the family connections between all these different species, showing who's more closely related to whom. It's the family tree of life. Now, at first glance, this might look a little complicated, but it's actually super easy to read. You start at the bottom, at the trunk, that's the oldest common ancestor. As you move up, you're moving forward in time, and you see the tree branch out. Every fork in the road is where a new group evolved. And the rule is simple. The closer two branches are to each other, the more closely related those two species are. And every single one of those branching points, every fork, represents a common ancestor. That's the shared relative that gave rise to all the new species that appear on the branches above it. All those lines that connect the branches, that represents descent. It's the unbroken chain of parents and children of inheriting traits that links every living thing all the way back to the very root of the tree.
So now we've got the tools. We know how to read the map. Let's put it all together and ask one of the biggest questions of all. Where do we, as humans, fit into this enormous, sprawling family tree?
Well, we belong to a family group that scientists call the hominids. This little club includes us, modern humans, along with our closest living relatives, you know them, chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, plus all of our ancestors that are now extinct. And when you use all the evidence we've been talking about, the anatomy, the embryos, and a lot more, you can build this family tree for the great apes. And as you can see, it shows exactly how the different groups branched off over millions of years. And it reveals, clear as day, that humans and chimpanzees share the most recent common ancestor. We are each other's closest living relatives on this planet. So we've seen the evidence, we've seen the family tree, but what's actually making all this happen? What's the engine that drives all this change, causing one species to branch off from another over these vast amounts of time? Well, the answer is microscopic. It all boils down to something called genetic variation. It's just the sum of all the slight differences in inherited traits between individuals in a species. These tiny, random variations are the raw material that evolution works with. They are the source of all the new features that, over millions and millions of years, create the incredible branching tree of life we've been exploring. So we've followed the clues, we've used anatomy and embryos to read the incredible story of life's past. But here's the thing to remember. Evolution never stops. It's not something that just happened a long time ago. The story is still being written, right now, in our DNA and in every living thing on Earth. Which leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? If these clues tell us who our ancestors were, what story will our descendants read about us?